top cop who put his badge on the line for justice.
You know the name Doug Poppa?
Yes, I do. God bless Doug Poppa, an honest cop.
I was elated, of course, but then as he testified, I was somewhat concerned for him, because I knew that they were probably going to crucify that man.
Sometimes the truth has a price. That may be the lesson of a Virginia police officer who says, in trying to do the right thing, he ended up paying for it.
The message you're sending is, see, we did it, Doug. You don't come out, you don't buck the system. No matter what the reason is, you just can basically keep your mouth shut. But if I wouldn't do it all over again, I would take the badge and I would leave it on somebody's desk and get out of police work. Because the day I can't tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, and the day the system doesn't want me to tell the truth because somebody's pressuring me, is the day I'd leave the badge on the desk and walk away.
Poppa was fired for insubordination. One man who confronted truth and consequences.
From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is Doug Poppa, Truth and Consequences Podcast. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Truth and Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Poppa. It's Wednesday, May 4th, 2022. The time out here is 03:45 hours, 3:45 in the morning. Last night, about 11:30, I conducted an exclusive on-the-record interview with gambler Brandon Sattler. Brandon Sattler, as you know, I have previously reported in episodes 110, 111, 112, and 114, is the man who has accused Resorts World Las Vegas President and CEO Scott Sibella of lying to the Nevada Gaming Control Board. My exclusive unedited interview with Mr. Sattler is 1 hour and 28 minutes in length. I will be showing some screenshots as the audio recording is playing on the screen, subjects that we talk about and he talks about during the interview. Like I said, it's an hour and 28 minutes long, so sit down and listen. It's very interesting, and I'll have a few comments at the end. So here we go. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, it's an exclusive interview. It's the first interview I think Brandon Sattler's given on the record. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Tuesday, May 3rd, 2022. The time is 23:21 hours. That's 11:21 p.m. Pacific time. From Las Vegas, Nevada, this is the Truth and Consequences Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Poppa. In episodes 110, 111, 112, and 114, I covered the scandal involving Resorts World Las Vegas President and CEO Scott Sibella. Gambler Brandon Sattler accused Sibella of lying to the Nevada Gaming Control Board when Sibella testified on March 2nd of this year. Tonight, in this episode, I have an exclusive interview with Mr. Brandon Sattler. Welcome to the podcast, Mr. Sattler. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. I want to get your side of this out. Just a little background here for the listeners. Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, Scott Sibella testified on March 2nd at the Nevada Gaming Control Board. And in essence, you go back and review those podcasts I just mentioned to get some more background. But Mr. Sibella testified that, in essence, he did not know Mr. Brandon Sattler. And the other part of the podcast involved a vendor at Resorts World Las Vegas, Tacos El Cabron, that Mr. Sattler allegedly did work for, but Mr. Sibella's saying he did no work at Resorts World Las Vegas. That's what Mr. Sibella testified to the Nevada Game Control Board. So like I said, for background on all this, because it is pretty involved, go back and review episodes 110, 111, 112, and 114. Okay, Brandon, let me start off this. How long have you known Scott Sibella?
Probably close to a little over 20 years.
Okay. Where did you first meet him at?
I first met him at either Treasure Island or Mirage. I'm not sure which property it was. It was so long ago. And I didn't really know him well then. I didn't get to know him well until he was at MGM Grand, and that was later in 2009 or 2010 when I was a heavy gambler there at those properties, the MGM properties, and I stayed in the mansions quite a bit, and I gambled there quite often, and I got to know him through Matt Saka, who was a host there at the time, and Ron Elwood, who was Scott Sibella's right hand and who was also a host there at the time, and who was the one that Scott Sibella always partied with and had fun with. And just being a big gambler, being outgoing, being friendly, and just having a lot of friends in Vegas. I would call them mostly fake friends, because the people in the casino business, mostly the casino hosts and things, they just want you to come in and gamble. Some get paid for you to lose, some don't care, but basically in that circle of gambling and high stakes, high roller type gamblers that I was, with $1 million credit lines everywhere, that's how I met him. And it mainly goes back to getting to know him, like I said, through a couple different individuals that worked at MGM Grand. I had ran into Scott at some of the, let's say, gambling functions, tournaments, and things like that, charity events back in the day at Mirage and Treasure Island, but it wasn't until MGM Grand I really got to know him. They had a Brad Garrett, the comedian and the actor from Everybody Loves Raymond. He also owns the Brad Garrett's Comedy Club. He was starting to do some events there at MGM Grand. And I remember there was a celebrity poker event where Brad Garrett and other celebrities showed up, and you had a chance to bid on certain gifts and giveaways. And one of them was dinner at Brad Garrett's house with Ray Romano and with Chef Barry from Chef Barry's Prime at Circa, who was also at Palms before that. And Scott was there at the tournament and just became friendly with him through also a third source, D'Angelo, something. He's a host at MGM Grand. And my other host, Chris Durrell, I can't really remember his last name, but just acquaintances and things. And then just playing there a lot until I was banned from the properties in November of 2014. I just became friends with him, and then we have a mutual friend in common. Chucky P is his nickname. His real name is Charles Peterson. He owns Folsom Lake Ford and a bunch of car dealerships there in Sacramento. He's one of the biggest gamblers of all time, probably losing over 50 to 70 million lifetime at Caesar's Palace and MGM properties and other properties. These guys gamble in huge, huge amounts of money. And in the gambling world and circle, and being an outgoing, friendly person that I am, I met these people and we all became friends. And so just in those circles, but Charles Peterson, aka Chucky P, he was very good friends with Scott Sibella and Ron Elwood. And just through him playing at MGM and through other mutual friends, we all just hung out and slowly got to know each other, to the point where I was staying at the mansions at the MGM Grand quite a bit. We would have parties there. Every now and then Scott would frequent the parties. I would invite him and other staff members, and so they would come by and say hello or frequent the parties when we had them. It was no secret that Scott liked to run around with various women behind his wife's back. That was no secret. Everybody knew about it. And it was probably around mid-2014 when I was really staying and playing a lot at the MGM Grand, and ran into him a few times. We had lunch a couple times. And then after I got 86 from the company, which according to MGM Grand, they said it was an isolated incident that happened 3 months before they gave me the letter. But in reality, from all the sources that I know that worked there, they said because of that 6-month winning streak I went on in the company to win millions and millions of dollars, never had a losing month. Once I learned how to play Baccarat, I won for 6 straight months. And then all of a sudden, after one huge night of winning at Aria and Bellagio the same night, the next day I went to cash in my chips, and they escorted me off property and told me I was banned, and they wouldn't give me a reason why. I later come to find out from Scott Sibella himself that it was over this isolated incident that they said I grabbed a cashier's hand at MGM Grand inappropriately. The way that this came up was in early to mid 2015, I was gambling at the Downtown Grand Hotel Casino, and Scott was there with who I assume was his mistress, a girl that was some executive at one of the local banks here in town. Scott was there with her gambling. I ran into him, and he obviously knew me. And I said, "Hey, you haven't been returning my calls," which I called him a couple times, and I also text messaged him, and he never returned them. And I said, "What's going on? Why? What's the real reason I got kicked out?" He says, "This is why. They said you grabbed this cashier's hand, et cetera, et cetera." So we went on to talk about it, and he was going to try to get me back into the company and to play there again. That night that I saw him at Downtown Grand, we went on to gamble together and have a few drinks and laughs and talk and things like that. And then a couple weeks later, there was a tournament at the Downtown Grand. I believe Al DeLeon, who was my host there, was also Scott's host there, but I can't confirm that 100%. Al DeLeon is the guy that brought in Terry Watanabe into Caesar's Palace, and Terry lost over $100+ million of his family's fortune. So Al DeLeon is a big name in the casino business, and he kind of knows everybody. And he made the tournament where Scott was there, and then I hung out with him at the tournament. And not too much really after that. The times that we hung out the most were pretty much at MGM Grand, or if I would see him at the Hard Rock or one of the other casinos gambling, then I would run into him. We would have drinks and talk, or some of those parties that we would have at the mansions, or some of the events for the players, such as the tournaments and things. So we weren't very good friends, but we were close enough that I would call him a friend, and I think he would call me a friend at the time, prior to 2014, I guess, or prior to 2015, actually.
Let me ask you a question, so I get your listeners know. When you knew Scott at the MGM, what was his position at the MGM? What was his title?
He was president, CEO.
Of the MGM Grand?
Of the MGM Grand, yeah. And I believe before that he was at Treasure Island, and before that he was at Mirage.
Okay. Go on. Keep going.
Yeah. So basically, again, I wasn't the greatest friends with him, but we did party in the same circles. And one of my very dear friends for many, many years was Charles Peterson, a.k.a. Chucky P. And Scott and his best friend at the time, Ron Elwood, were all very good friends. So,
and who was Ron Elwood? Who was Ron Elwood?
Ron Elwood, I believe he's the director of casino marketing at Mandalay Bay now. Before that, he was at Mirage for many years, and before that, he was with Scott at MGM. Everybody in the gambling world, local casino hosts and players, knows that Scott Sibella and Ron Elwood were inseparable. They were always together. They were always getting into trouble. From what I understand, from rumors I've heard and people that have told me stories, they got into a lot of trouble at MGM Grand, basically drinking while they were there, or partying with guests, or going to their rooms, and Scott would constantly brush it under the carpet, or Ron would get in trouble and Scott would brush it under the carpet. It's no secret in this town, from the likes of Bobby Baldwin, Bill Macbeth, Scott Sibella, Derek Stevens, and others that are all presidents or CEOs or casino owners or whatever, that all these guys like to party. It's no secret. Especially Scott Sibella and Ron Elwood back in the MGM days. They would party all the time with guests and such. And so I was, I don't know if the word is lucky enough, but I was invited to a lot of these parties, and I had fun. Were there drugs there? Absolutely. Did I see people doing drugs? Absolutely. Did I ever see Scott or anyone else do drugs? Absolutely. I made a joke in my deposition, which all of this came out from, and this podcast and all of these news articles, I don't know, there's probably a couple hundred of them now, all came out because I was asked questions under oath on my deposition, and I made a comment, and I said, we probably had sex with the same girls or something to that effect at the same time, which was a joke signifying that I did know Scott, and that, yes, we partied together and we knew a lot of people in the same circles, mainly Chucky P., who, like I said, was one of the biggest gamblers for a very, very long time, losing in excess of probably $50 million in his lifetime of gambling. And there were incidents where Scott Sibella, myself, Ron Elwood, sometimes Flinny Ray Williams, who used to work for Wynn and who's been like a son to Steve and Elaine Wynn for many, 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 many years, until a few years ago when he finally got fired at Wynn. Everyone said he was like the son that they never had, Steve and Elaine. Well, he was good friends with Scott as well. And I remember an incident where we all went to Venetian, Scott and me and Flinny and some other people. Chucky P was there, and we were all gambling together and drinking, and there were girls there. That's just one of many incidents. I don't recall all of them. There was probably a couple dozen. I remember some of the mansion parties that we had there, whether me or Chucky or some of the other guys, and Scott would come to those with Elwood and others. So Scott referred to me at his deposition as, I don't know him from Adam, and he probably tried to sell us or scam us for some TVs, something to that effect, which is all lies.
Okay, before we get into that, I just want to get back to something. At the
Yes.
At your deposition, April 5th, and I put this on my podcast, you testified in the deposition that I don't have it in front of me, but I believe this is pretty close. We partied together, we had dinner together, we ate together, we did drugs together, and we had sex with multiple women at the same time. Can you clarify? Because you said now that is not exactly true. What did you mean by that?
Well, I said the sex thing with women at the moment. If you look at the context in which I said it, it was more jokingly and sarcastic because I was baffled and dumbfounded to learn of Scott's deposition where he said he didn't know me from Adam, when just several months earlier I interacted with him at Resorts World several times. So just like I was saying prior to you asking this question, in my deposition where I was asked, not volunteered, but I was asked questions under oath about my relationship with Scott Sibella because of my involuntary bankruptcy petition that was filed by my ex-business partner and associate where he lied, and that's a whole nother story for another time. But basically, they've been coming after me now, trying to locate assets and money and things like that. And one of the things that they did is they read or came across some Twitter tweets from RJ which mentioned my friendship with Scott Sibella, because RJ was my friendship with Scott Sibella for many years. And when the attorneys, Mark Weisenmiller for James Russell, issued the subpoena to Sibella based on RJ's Twitter tweets or whatever they're called, that's why they asked me those questions, because Gerald Gardner, who is the lead counsel for Resorts World, and I guess he's acting as Scott Sibella's private counsel as well, based on his response to the subpoena, they wanted to question Scott and ask him some stupid questions about finances and other things with me, which never took any place. And so at my deposition, I'm under oath, and I'm asked questions under oath randomly out of the blue about Scott Sibella, which I did not expect, but they asked those questions and I had to answer them honestly and truthfully.
Okay,
I want to make sure that you're...
Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish, and I've got a question for you.
Yes, I just want to make sure that you and your listeners know I didn't deliberately or intentionally go after Scott in my deposition. I answered questions to the best of my knowledge, ability, and truth that I know it as. And the questions were asked because of the subpoena that they issued for Scott Sibella regarding any financial interactions with me, and also my gambling history, I guess, at Resorts World, because they subpoenaed my gaming records, and mainly because of RJ's tweets. So I had to answer these questions under oath to prove that there was no type of financial connection with me and Scott. But when they asked those specific questions, of course there was a friendship with Scott. Of course there was money that went back and forth on casino tables at other properties. I remember at Venetian, he needed to borrow a few thousand, or Ron did. I don't remember the exact details.
Who is he? Who is he? Who's the he you're referring to?
Scott Sibella and or Ron Elwood, one time at the Venetian, needed to borrow some money when we were gambling, and I don't remember if I gave it to them or Chucky P gave it to them. But then there was another incident at El Dorado Casino in Reno that I remember Chucky telling me about, where Chucky was at the casino, at the El Dorado Casino in Reno, and he ran into randomly Scott Sibella and Ron Elwood. This was a few years ago. They were gambling there, and one or both of them borrowed money from Chucky, and I remember Chucky complaining that they never paid him back. I cannot confirm if it was Sibella that borrowed the money or if it was Elwood. It was one of them, and this story was told to me by Chucky. So that story and a couple of stories of my own that I witnessed being in his presence, and other big gamblers that I know he knows friends with. Everybody knows that Scott Sibella is a big gambler. He loves to gamble.
Okay, let me stop you there. When you refer to he, when you're talking he, I just want to get this down for the record. You're referring to Mr. Sibella, unless you identify somebody else. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
When I say he, but some of the instances, I don't remember exactly if it was Ron Elwood or Scott Sibella when it became the money, like the loan. And it wasn't from me. It was once at Venetian where they borrowed money from another gambler, my friend Chucky, and then another time that I was not present for. I was present at the Venetian, but at the El Dorado Hotel Casino in Reno. So basically, to wrap it all up, the extent of my friendship with him was not outside of the casino. It was basically only inside of the casino, except for one gambling day or night that we did at Venetian when we all went out. And the other, let's say, incidents or times we hung out were either at the mansions at MGM or at one of the restaurants or maybe one of the bars. If there was a Super Bowl party or some kind of tournament, he may, show up and frequent it or talk to people. But it wasn't until Brad Garrett, the actor and celebrity, had his charity poker tournament at MGM, which I believe was either in 2013 or 2014. I don't remember exactly. I think it might have been mid 2014 because it was right around Christmas and Hanukkah 2014 in December that I and my then fiance Jennifer and my friend Tony went to Brad Garrett's house in Malibu with Chef Barry and Ray Romano and some other actors. And that was the thing that I bid on to go to his place. And during that tournament, the poker tournament, Sibella was in the poker tournament that day, and I spent time with him. And then again, when I saw him after I was 86 from the company at the Downtown Grand, he remembered me right away. I sat down on the blackjack table with him and the girl, and he said, "Hey, Brandon, how are you?" We got into a conversation. And then he personally gave me his word that he was going to look into why I was 86 from the company.
What year are we talking? What's the time frame with here? What year is this? How are you talking about?
It was 2014 that the tournament and the Brad Garrett poker charity tournament was there. And it was December of 14 that I went to Brad Garrett's house and had dinner because I bid on that auctioned item. But Scott Sibella was not there at Brad Garrett's house. I think he was supposed to show up and something came up, a conflicting schedule. But and then after that, when I ran into Scott at the Downtown Grand, it was somewhere in mid-year of 2015. And then Scott said, call or text me and then I'll get you an answer. And he did, and he just said that I wasn't welcome back, and he told me the reason why. After that...
Let me stop you there for a second. How were you going to call and text him? Did he give you his email or cell phone number?
I had his number. I had his phone number, his cell phone number.
You had Scott Sibella's cell phone number?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
I was friends with him.
Okay. And how long did you have that? Were there more than one number? How long did you have that number? Was it the same number when you knew an MGM, or did he change numbers?
I don't know his number today, so I'm not sure. I don't even think I have it in my phone anymore. I probably deleted it, but the number that I had was the number I would text him or call him on during the days and months and years that I gambled within the company. I gambled within the company from 1999 till 2014 when I was kicked out. So
okay, and the company you're referring to is MGM Grand Las Vegas.
Well, MGM Resorts. So I think it's called MGM Mirage Resorts. When I say the company, I mean MGM, Aria, Mandalay Bay, Bellagio, Mirage, Treasure Island. As a company whole, I gambled. but the majority of my play that I did the most playing at was MGM and probably Bellagio. But before I moved to Las Vegas in 2009, I traveled here quite a bit and frequented here, and I stayed at the MGM Grand in the Mansions quite a bit. And we had a lot of parties there and so forth. And there was a couple of times during those parties that Scott would come by and say hello. And there was no secret that there was a few of us, like I mentioned, Chucky P, there was a few of us that did a lot of cocaine back in the day. And there was a couple times that we all hung out and partied and did cocaine together. It was no secret. That was a long time ago.
Okay, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there because I want to go back to the deposition. Okay, in the deposition you said prior to 2014, I would consider him, meaning Sibella, a friend. After that, not so much. And you kind of just explained a little bit now. But let me ask you a question. Well, you said, and I don't have the deposition in front of me, Brandon, so I'm just taking this off the top of my head. But you said in the deposition, we partied, we had dinner, we ate together, we did drugs together, we had sex with multiple women at the same time. Now, I'm going to ask you a question one at a time. When you say you partied together, have you partied with Scott Sibella? I want to ask you that. You're not. That's what you said in the deposition. So you partied with Scott Sibella, yes or no?
Yes. And let me clarify. When I say partied, I mean, we would go out for drinks and we would hang out. I would have a party in the Mansions, or another player would have a party in the Mansions, or the casino would have a party for its guests. That's what I mean when I say partied. I don't mean it in reference to drugs or alcohol, although there was drugs and alcohol. When I say drugs, cocaine, I'm assuming, at these parties or at some of them. And so my basis for saying partied is just generally speaking.
Okay, so let me, just to clarify this, Mrs. Sibella is at some of these functions when you're there, the parties at the mansion. Okay, that's what you said, right? Am I correct in assuming that?
Yes.
Okay. Correct. When you say now you said you partied together, do you mean he was just there at these parties with you and some other people, or were you personally partying? Let me ask you this. Have you and Scott Sibella ever participated in drug use together?
I wouldn't say together at the same time, but I would say the same night, yes. Did I ever see Scott Sibella do cocaine, like snort it up his nose, like visibly see it? Not exactly, but I know he did it, kind of. It's hard to explain. If you're at a party, whether it's my party or their party or someone else's, and it's a small group of people, it's kind of known that, a certain person may have cocaine or may have, blow, whatever words they're using, on them, and that person is passing it around for everybody. So it was just kind of known that, these different people did cocaine at these parties, including myself. And it was just kind of known.
Okay, let me ask you a question, okay? Because is there somebody over there? I hear some background noise.
Do I believe that he did it based on the situations and based on
Hello?
the people we were with and based on everyone else doing it? Yes.
Hello? Hello? Brandon?
Are you there?
I can't hear you. You sound very low. I didn't hear anything you said. There's something wrong with your phone.
Hello?
Yeah, what happened? I lost you there for a while.
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking and then it went dead.
Okay, just keep the phone close to your mouth. We need to clarify. I want to clarify this. When you say party, and this is what I'm asking you, okay? When you say party, if I go to a party and there's, just say a number, 10 people in there, and then somebody said to me, did you party with Joe Smith? Well, Joe Smith was at the party. But I say, well, he was at the party, but he wasn't a friend of mine. He just attended these functions. That's what I'm trying to clarify here. When you say, you said in the deposition, we partied, we did drugs, we ate dinner. So I need to nail this down. Was that true, or was that taken out of context, or something that you said in there that you didn't mean to say in the deposition? Because we're talking about.
When I say we partied, there was parties that I invited him to. And then there were parties that I was invited to that he was at or that he showed up to. So when I say we partied, I mean both of them. Whether it was my party and he showed up, or whether it was someone else's room or party and we both showed up.
Okay.
That's what I mean partied.
Okay.
So
let me ask you a question. Okay, listen, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to nail this down. So when Mr. Sibella testified at the Gaming Control Board hearing on March 2nd and said 3 times he did not know you from Adam, which you've been telling me for the past 30 minutes that is blatantly false. He did know you, whether he knew you from as a gambler, he knew you from being at parties or going out to dinner. You're saying that part of it is correct. So when he's saying that to the Gaming Control Board, I didn't know that man from Adam 3 times. That is not true. That is essence a lie, for lack of a better word.
100%, it's a lie. 100%.
Okay, now.
And
let me finish my questions first. I got to go through these one at a time.
Because I would like to elaborate on the recent events that are fresh in his mind that shows, and I can prove that he lied to the Gaming Control Board. And again, I'm not trying to go after Scott maliciously. I have no ill will towards him or anything like this. None of this was brought up by me or caused by me. I'm just the guinea pig in the middle that has been asked questions at a deposition where I'm sworn under oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. And if I lie, it's committing perjury and I could go to jail. So I'm not looking to break the laws. I'm not looking to protect anybody. But when questions were asked of me, and specifically that was brought up about knowing me from Adam, well, not only does Scott know that that's not true, a lot of people around Scott that are gamblers or friends of his know that that's not true, because even random people have commented online now, oh, I've seen Brandon with Scott plenty of times at Resorts World. I've seen him with Scott plenty of times at MGM Grand. You know, it's no secret that we were friends. Now, we really only hung out at events or parties at the mansions or things like that. We didn't go out of the casino industry, you know, to hang out. And I didn't plan on meeting him at the Downtown Grand. I ran into him at the Palms Hotel a couple years ago before COVID. He was sitting at the bar by himself having dinner. Hey, Scott, how are you? Hey, Brandon, how are you? I sat down, had drinks with them. The people I was supposed to meet were late. Him and I ate together at the bar. He was there by himself, and he had just lost, I think, $100,000 at the Palms gambling. And he was pissed off and very upset, and he vented to me. So when he says that he does not know me for Adam, he is a blatant liar. And again, nothing malicious, but he lied, and I was put on under oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. And I had to tell the truth. And there was many incidents where I interacted with him in the last few months at Resorts World that were fresh in his mind. And he still said he didn't know me from Adam.
Talk about that. Elaborate on that right now.
Yeah. So basically, I was hired by Jaime Barr, John Paul, and David Stroh. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his last name, who I believed were partners or owners in Tacos El Carbone on Maryland Parkway across from UNLV, and also at Resorts World. They have a in-house kitchen downstairs in the basement, below the day club or whatever it is there. And then they have an exterior location outside the main entrance on Las Vegas Boulevard. So I was hired back in, I believe it was June, maybe July, to oversee the installation, sales and installation of audio, video, surveillance equipment, televisions, wiring and things that were going on in the Tacos El Carbone containers that were being built by Extreme Cubes in Henderson, which I frequented the facility where they were building them to help design the system and tell them where all the wiring was going to go and things like that several times. And the way that it was made clear to me is that Resorts World is a 50% owner or has a 50% ownership stake in Tacos El Carbon, and that it's owned by Jaime Barr, John Paul, and David Stroy, whatever his name is.
Stroge.
I never knew of any Peter or any father of David's being involved until I read it in the media or until RJ Cipriani told me.
Okay.
I never knew any of that.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Who hired you to do the work at Tacos El Cabron inside Resorts World?
Jaime Barr did.
And where do you know Jaime
I don't
from?
know if I'm pronouncing Jaime's last name correct, but Jaime is
It's
the
Behar.
one.
It's Behar for the people listening to the podcast. Behar. How did you know Jaime Behar? Did you know him before this? How did you connect with him?
I met him gambling several years ago through a mutual person, Bob Madrigal, who's a host at Treasure Island. He introduced me to Jaime and David and all these guys many years ago. He also introduced me to a guy named Craig Kolk, who was a casino host at the Barona Hotel and Casino in San Diego. And I would frequent down there. And I didn't know that these guys were involved in any kind of illegal activities or sports betting or anything else. I come later to find that out. But I became friends with Craig. I did a bunch of audio video surveillance work at his home, sold him a bunch of equipment and that he had installed on his own. And so we just became friends. And we kind of stayed out of touch for sorts after he got indicted, which I didn't know he had gotten in trouble until much later. But basically playing at Red Rock Hotel Casino a lot in 2018, 2019, and a few months prior to COVID shutdown, and then even playing there afterwards, I ran into Jaime a bunch of times there and David. I never saw David gambling there. I saw Jaime gambling, but I ran into both of them. And I remember it was mine and Bob Madrigal's birthdays. October, mine is the 20th, his is the 21st of 2019. We celebrated our birthdays there. And I believe there was also a tournament there at the same time. And Jaime was at that tournament. And if I recall correctly, I believe that David was at that tournament as well. But David did not participate in the tournament or the gambling.
And what casino was that at? What casino was that at? What property is that?
That was at Red Rock Hotel Casino.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did Jaime say to you, we need work done? How did that happen?
So basically, I saw him a few times and things like that. And I don't remember exactly, but one of the hotel casinos I saw him at, it could have been Treasure Island, it could have been Red Rock, it could have been somewhere else. He said that they were going to be opening up a second location in Las Vegas of the Tacos El Carbon, and that their first location is about to be completed. And I said, why didn't you call me to bid the audio video work? And he said, oh, I didn't know, or I didn't remember. Something to that effect. I believe we were at Red Rock at a tournament, but I could be wrong. Anyhow, so then he invited me to the grand opening of Tacos El Carbona, Maryland, and said, they're going to be doing this thing. So we started talking more. And then I frequented California a lot. I'm born and raised there, and I do a lot of business down there. So I went down to San Diego, and I met with Jaime and John Paul, who goes by JP, and David, and I basically gave them the pricing, and we talked about how to move forward. And they basically said they wanted me to do the work, and they put me in touch with the people at Extreme Cubes in Henderson. And Extreme Cubes is owned by Don Ahern of Ahern Rentals. And so I basically went down there and met with their people down there, the design team and their electricians, and I helped design these containers as far as the audio video part of it goes, and the telecommunications that were going to be linked up with Resorts World Telecommunications. So this went on for several months. There was a lot of delays and such like that, but I designed it, and then they put all the wiring and things in at Extreme Cubes for my subcontractors to actually hook up the equipment. So once the cubes were delivered to Tacos El Carbon, and again, all of my business interactions were mainly with Jaime, but also with John Paul, not really with David at all. I don't remember really interacting with him much at all until after the tacos opened up. But I always thought, by the way it was portrayed, that David, Jaime, and JP were all partners, and that it was my understanding and belief that Jaime was the major and majority partner, and they had some silent partners. Never once was it ever mentioned to me, talked about, or discussed that David's father was the owner or managing member. Never once.
Did you ever meet
And
Peter Stroge?
did I ever meet who?
Peter Stroge, David's father.
No, never met him.
Never had
And
any contact with him.
I'm sorry?
You never had any contact with him. I was going to ask you. I think you were going to say yes, you did. You haven't?
Yeah, none to the best of my knowledge, unless it was somebody that I met that I didn't know who it was.
Brandon, who told you that Resorts World had 50-50 interest in Tacos El Carbon inside their casino? Who told you that?
David told me, John Paul told me, and Jaime told me. They've all told me a couple of times. And when all of this came out in the open and the news media found out about it, and again, I didn't expose this. I didn't really even know what was going on. RJ Cipriani dug down to the bottom of it, and he got it all exposed on his Twitter and in the media. And because of everything that he put and the traction that it gained in the media, that's when all these news outlets were contacting me for the story. And somehow, when I did my deposition, I guess certain people knew that I was doing the deposition because it was public, and they wanted a piece of the deposition. They wanted to read it. I didn't know that those questions about Tacos El Carbon and about David and about Jaime and even RJ and Scott Sibella were going to be asked. I don't think any of it had any bearing on my finances or anything to do with my involuntary bankruptcy case. So it was kind of strange and peculiar that those questions were asked. And the fact that Scott Sibella's subpoena was squashed, I understand, because him and I have never had any financial interactions with each other at all. So I would understand that. But RJ mentioned some things that were completely untrue about my relationship with Sibella and also my fiance, Katie Moriarty. And so when RJ mentioned those things in his Twitter, somehow, some way, I guess Mark Weisenmiller, the attorney for James Russell, got a hold of him, and that's how this whole thing started. So when I started reading all of this news and this media stuff coming out about David and his father and all these things, it was a shock to me, because as much as I interacted with David, Jaime, and JP, I never once knew anybody named Peter Stroge, David's father. I never knew that there was a main owner. I was always led under the impression that Resorts World owned 50% of it. I remember a conversation David and I had back in January or February that Resorts World had explained that they wanted their money from Tacos El Carbon for the profitability for 2021. And David said that his team had to explain to them, you're 50% owner, so you share in 50% of the losses and the profits. And that's what David told me, word for word, from his mouth to my ears. So this whole bullshit about his father owning it and all this other crap, I've never known that. And it may be true, maybe. It may not be true, but it's not something that was ever known or made known to me or my subcontractors or anything else.
Okay.
And also
let me interrupt you for a second. Okay. When you say that David and these other people were telling you that Resorts World had 50-50 ownership inside Tacos El Carbon, and David's telling you he's conferring with Resorts World. Now, Resorts World is an entity. What actual person do you know that David Stroge was talking to inside Resorts World? What member, what executive?
As I just said, I can't even tell you that it was David talking to them. I said What I just said is David's management team or David's team was talking to them. I didn't say David was.
Okay, who when you say them, did they ever identify who them were?
All I knew was when David explained it to me, because he kind of laughed about it, says these, whatever he said, something to the reference like these people think that they, should get profit. Well, I think David said that Tacos El Cabron took a $67,000 or $60-something thousand loss for 2021, and he was like, just shaking his head. I could tell on when I talked to him on the phone, because Resorts World wanted part of profits that didn't exist. They took a loss, and from what I understand, the way the deal is that was explained to me in casual conversation, not only by David, Jaime, and JP and Jesse, their general manager, but by Scott Sibella himself at the August blackjack tournament when my fiance Katie Moriarty and I had drinks with Scott Sibella, and he was pretty buzzed, drinking quite a bit at the tournament. He was sitting at the bar by himself. I approached him. He immediately said, "Hi, Brandon," knew exactly who I was once again. And we also had 3 or 4 interactions prior to that throughout Resorts World property. He had come to Tacos El Cabron a couple times to check on the progress. I would walk out, say hello to him. So there's a lot of inconsistencies with David's story now that it's public, especially with Scott's. And, everybody wants to discredit my credibility because they want to believe this big, powerful CEO, Scott Sibella, who I have no ill will, no animosity for. But when you tell the Gaming Control Board you don't know me from Adam, and there's casino employees and gamblers and other people out there that know that's not true, it only takes a loose cannon like RJ Cipriani to make it known otherwise. And because of RJ's tweets, that's how this whole thing started. I'm not here to defame anyone. I'm not here to slander anyone. I'm not here to do anything but to clear my name and tell the truth. There is no skin in the game for me. I have no gain on any of this. I'm deposed, and I have to answer questions under oath. Just like you're asking me questions that are not under oath, I'm telling you the truth because I want the truth to be known, that not only is Scott a liar, and I believe David is a liar, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't concern me other than the truth being told. If Scott lied to the Gaming Control Board, about certain things, which I know he lied, then that's between him and them. It doesn't have to do with me. The only thing that it has to do with is the truth being told.
Okay, let me ask you a question. When you say you were doing work inside Resorts World, and you made some comments in your deposition that you were like the supervisor, you had subcontractors, but that would still be you doing work there. When you were at Resorts World, Tacos El Cabron, inside Resorts World, at any time doing that work, supervising, standing there, did you ever see Scott Sibella, and did he ever converse with you?
Yes. I just told you earlier, he did converse with me multiple times throughout the process.
And is there anybody else that can confirm that?
Oh, Katie Moriarty, and she's in jail right now, and Marty Mizrahi, but obviously he doesn't want to get involved, but he met Scott through me that night at the thing, and there were some other gamblers that were there that night that saw me.
Let's stay away from for a second. Just listen to what I'm saying. You said in the deposition you did work at Resorts World, either as supervising the subcontractors or whatever. I'm asking this question. While you were were working inside or outside of the Tacos El Cabron location inside Resorts World, did Scott Sibella ever see you there? Did you ever converse with him while you were doing any type of work at Tacos El Cabron at Resorts World?
Yes.
Can you explain that? Can you elaborate that? How did that happen?
Scott and some other executives from Resorts World, and I believe also one of their construction companies, it could be Gillette Construction or one of the other ones that were there, had come out to the containers outside on the side of the building where they're at permanently now, off of Las Vegas Boulevard, right there in the front, and just to check the progress. I was there on one or two of the occasions where I would come out and say hello to Scott and say hello to the people that were there. We didn't have any kind of conversation about anything except I remember Scott asked me how things were coming along, and I would explain what was taking place and what the timeline was. And it was later on, weeks after that, maybe close to a month, maybe not that long, that they had the blackjack tournament at Resorts World. And when they had the blackjack tournament there, I was playing in the blackjack tournament. And upon getting kicked out of my round, my fiance, Katie, was sitting at the bar across from Scott. She didn't know who he was. He didn't know who she was. And when I approached, I talked to Katie for a couple minutes, and I explained to her who that was. And then I waved to him from across the bar, and I remember saying, "Hey, Scott, how are you doing?" He goes, "Hey, Brandon, how's it going?" And I said, "Good." And I said, "We're almost done. It's coming along. Hopefully they'll get it open soon," because there was a delay with the permits, with the city, with the plumbing. All of my audio, video, television, camera, telecommunications work was complete. So my part of it was done. So then I walked over to Scott. I shook his hand, and he was very adamant and upset. Something to the effect of, "These motherfuckers or these fuckers need to get this thing open. This is costing us money. This is embarrassing." And he literally just went off on a tangent about it not being opened, about the delays. And then I remember him bad mouthing JP, John Paul, who is not only, I think, the general manager, but he's also good friends with Scott. He's the reason why Tacos El Cabron is there. He told me he's known Scott for a long time. He presented the offer or the deal or whatever it is to get it there to Scott. He said that Scott would go down to San Diego quite often, would eat down there and visit with John Paul. So he said him and Scott are very good friends. So at this time that we're having drinks and Scott is upset, he seemed a little irate. He seemed a little buzzed. He says that basically he was belittling John Paul and talking shit about him, saying that he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. None of these guys do. And I made it clear to Scott at that point that my work, the audio, video, surveillance, telecommunications work, is complete. And I expressed what I knew were the delays about the plumbing and the permits and things like that. And Scott just kept shifting the blame to JP and Jaime, but mainly JP and such. And Scott said he was getting heat from the higher-ups, who I believe the CEO of Genting Gaming, LT Kim, maybe. I don't know, but he was getting heat for it not being opened yet. And there was a big weekend.
When you say, let me stop for that. When you say it's not open yet, we're talking about Tacos El Cabron, vendor inside Resorts World. That's what we're talking about, correctly?
Yeah, well, we're talking about the location of Tacos El Cabron. That's the vendor that's outside of Resorts World, they're like a container. It's like a shipping container, 2 shipping containers put together next to the Fat Tuesdays. Inside of Resorts World, down in the basement, I had a Resorts World employee vendor ID that I had to use to go to where, walk around the property and to wear visibly. And that is where their kitchen was and their main office downstairs. So
you actually, I know what you're talking about with vendor badges. We have them too with the other properties on. It's a security issue, so people who walk around can be identified. So you're telling me that while you were working at Tacos El Cabron there, whether you were supervising or doing the work yourself, is immaterial to me. You were there as a supervisor that's working there. You're telling me that Resorts World Security gave you a vendor badge to pin on your clothes to identify you that you had permission to be on the property. Is that correct?
Somewhat. I didn't get it from Resorts World Security. I guess they're the ones who issued it. JP, John Paul, he's the one who gave it to me. So he obtained it from, I'm assuming, security or somebody, and then they provided it to me. And I used it for a couple weeks, And then I gave it back to John Paul, and I really didn't need it anymore. Everybody was coming and going. No one questioned anybody.
So from what you're telling,
like you belong there.
from what you're telling me, from this past, we're talking almost 58 minutes now, when Scott Sibella testified on March 2nd and told the Gaming Control Board 3 times he did not know you from Adam, twice he said you did no work at Resorts World. From what listening to you right now, and you said there's people that can corroborate that you were there and you were doing this work, that Scott Sibella, for lack of a better words, lied to the Gaming Control Board because you did do work at Tacos El Carbone and you have known him for quite some time, correct?
Yes, more than that. There's a couple employees that I'm friends with that work at that work at Resorts World. Female employee who is a floor supervisor and dealer, and a male employee who's a floor supervisor, and a few other employees that have all reached out to me from reading these things on the internet and reading the stuff that's been made public, and they just basically say that they can't believe that he lied when they have all seen me with him. 2 of these individuals that I'm speaking of, I'm not going to give their names, but they saw me on property with Scott several times. And a lot of people saw me talking with him during the tournament at the bar. He got up from the bar and he had to do some tournament stuff and make an appearance. And then he went back to the bar again. And I went back there and we finished having drinks together. So, Doug, if you walk into a restaurant and you're sitting at a bar and I walk in and I'm sitting next to you, we're having just a casual, friendly conversation, okay? And I say, I'm going to order some shots, and you decide to pick up the bill, and you ask me my name, and we sit and we converse for, let's say, 20 minutes. That's it. And then we go our separate ways. 6 months later, if you're an intelligent person, you don't have Alzheimer's, you don't have dementia, you don't have any, memory congenitive problems, don't you think you would remember me if we only met once and we shared a 20 or 30-minute exchange of drinking and talking over at a bar? You would probably remember me. So not only did Scott say he didn't know me from Adam, the conversation alone that took place over the course of an hour, maybe longer, on and off at the tournament, was enough for him to remember me. Not to mention all of the other interactions. I had dinner with him at Palms. He was sitting at the corner of the bar at the steakhouse there at the Palms that Barry was in charge of. I don't know if it was called Barry's or whatever, but the Fertittas bought the Palms and they had the steakhouse there. I walked in. I've seen Scott there several times. I've seen him gambling there. I've talked to him. I've played across from him in the high limit room at Palms. I had dinner with him that night at Palms at the bar. He had drinks. He had ordered food. I sat right next to him and I shared into those drinks and food. How can you say you don't know me? Forget everything prior to, let's say, 2018 or 2019. Let's say that I never met Scott, which is not true. Of course I met him and I've hung out with him. But let's just say I met him for the first time at the Palms. Or let's say that I met him for the first time at Resorts World. So the interaction with him at Resorts World in front of the containers when we were making them, there's one. The interaction with him at the tournament, there's 2. Then there was another interaction where we were gambling down on the casino floor. Me and Chucky P and Scott Sibella and some of the other executives walked up and said hi to me and Chucky while we were playing blackjack. And Chucky was going to have dinner with him that night. And Scott asked me if I wanted to join for dinner, and I couldn't because I had other plans. So for somebody that doesn't know me from Adam, he sure knew me on those occasions that we had those conversations.
Okay. You still there? Did I lose you?
No, I'm here. So to answer your question, Scott Sibella lied under oath to the Gaming Control Board to obtain his license. If people don't believe me, that's okay. Because at the end of the day, sooner or later, it's going to come out. And if the Gaming Control Board wants to really investigate and really prove that this is true or not true, they know how to do it. Just like Scott Sibella said he didn't know R.J. Cipriani at all. He didn't even know he was in the building. R.J. Cipriani produced several text messages and emails that were made public on your podcast, and he also produced them to the Gaming Control Board weeks ago, if not more than months ago, and they never did anything about it. He proved beyond a reasonable doubt through written communications that Scott Sibella lied about his interactions. Furthermore, RJ Cipriani has said under oath and has said to me and others that Scott Sibella and him had conversations about me several times. RJ said that he went and had pizza at the new pizza place there in Resorts World with Scott Sibella and another person. I forgot the gentleman's name. And my name came up, and RJ was talking to Scott about me on more than one occasion. And one other thing, I was having dinner with several people, a couple executives from Wynn, someone from another casino who I'm going to leave out right now, that person's name. And my fiance and some friends were having dinner one night at Wally's. And Scott Sibella was there with Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, who I know from some interactions and business things in the past. And Mark Davis and Scott Sibella walked right up to the patio outside, on the main floor there while we were having dinner, and both said hello to me.
And what restaurant, what location was this at?
That was at Wally's. And
say that again. I'm not familiar with that. Can you spell what is that? Is that a restaurant?
Wally's is a restaurant at Resorts World.
Wally's, okay.
Yeah. And Jake Rudolph was my casino host who had to use his company credit card to pay for the meal because they don't do outside comps. And somebody higher up, I don't know if it was Scott Sibella or who it was, had to authorize the large payment from the Resorts World company credit card to pay Wally's because they don't do any kind of bartering or comping system with Wally's.
How much was that? How much was that bill? Do you know? How much was that? Do you know?
I'd have to go back in my records, but I'm going to assume that it was close to $1,000 or more because it's very expensive. So I don't know the exact amount, but I know it was, somewhere in that neighborhood of money. But again, Sibella, who's, acquaintances with Mark Davis of the Raiders from their interactions, there's pictures of them together and so forth, came up and said hello to me.
I'm bewildered, Brandon, because you're talking about all this, because Scott Sibella, according to what he told the Gaming Commission, doesn't know you, pretty much doesn't know RJ. So I'm being facetious. I'm just making a joke here.
Yeah.
Let me get back to.
He said, I quote him, he does not know me from Adam.
Well, he said that three times. He said that 3 times.
He knew he was lying.
Yes, he said that 3 times, and he said twice you did no work at Resorts World. So from what you're telling me now, and from what the other podcast I did, that there's a real problem. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you some questions here.
Hold on, before you ask me a question, Doug, you and I had a conversation earlier today, and I think you kind of doubted me about a lot of this, and we talked about me being on the podcast. And I told you that I could not share certain information with you or documents because of either an NDA or other things that were agreed upon or signed upon that were confidential, and I could not produce these documents without a subpoena. I agreed to show you these documents in the agreement that you would not show anybody else until it was okay or until we know that it could be made public. Do you recall this conversation that you and I had?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Can you tell your audience what you were provided to or what I provided you to prove that I'm not lying, that I'm telling the truth, and that my credibility should stay intact about these dealings with Scott Sibella and Resorts World?
I can tell the audience right now that I viewed documents that lead me to believe, no doubt, that Brandon Sattler was contracted to do work at Resorts World, Las Vegas. And like I said, I gave him my word that I would not produce them, their financial documents, but I saw enough documents to satisfy me that Brandon Sattler did do work at Resorts World, Las Vegas, and and I'm going to go on a stretch here. Is it okay if I mention a name? Not to mention the context, but the name, a name. You okay with that, Brandon?
What do you mean, a name of what?
A name of a contact person at Resorts World. I mean, at Tacos El Carbone inside Resorts World.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the documents that I viewed, like I said, satisfied me that Lex Management, which is Brandon Sattler's company,
Lex Project Management.
Lex Project Management, no doubt in my mind, did work inside Resorts World and was paid by Tacos El Cabron, and the person's name that's on that invoice is Jaime Behar, and that's all I'm going to say at this point. So everybody knows from these previous podcasts that Jaime Behar was one of the co-defendants with David Stroge in the 2015 FBI arrest for operating an illegal gambling establishment. Jaime Behar, the charges were dropped against him. Like I said on my other podcast, the charges were dismissed by the government. David Stroge was pled guilty. JP, who identified, everybody knows in episode, I believe it was 112, I identified JP, that Brandon, you said you didn't know his last name. I identified that gentleman as Jean-Paul, Jean Rojo, Rojo. And since that podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I have I obtained photographs, and there's no doubt in my mind that Jean-Paul Rojo is connected to Tacos El Cabron at Resorts World. I have no problem with saying that, and I'll have some of those photographs maybe when I publish this audio podcast on the video when I do the production later tonight or tomorrow morning. You still there, Brandon, or do we lose you?
John Paul, I'm sorry for interrupting you. John Paul / JP, whatever, he goes by JP to me, but he was pretty much mainly my contact there. He's who Jaime Behar put me in with to facilitate everything. He's the one that I interacted with most. And just recently, he called me to walk him through how to change the passwords on the DVR or the NVR at Resorts World, which is kind of interesting because I had access to the property until I was 86, and then they wanted me to go back after I was 86 to they had a problem with the NVR to do that and to do some other stuff there. And I said, well, you need to get it approved. And they said, don't worry about it. You're not inside Resorts World. You can be on the sidewalk. You can be on the property where the containers are. And I went there in, I don't know when it was sometime, I believe, in February to do some work on the TVs with this thumb drive for their menu. And I had access to the NVR at the time. And I had some private
Explain to the people what an NVR is that don't know.
Network video recorder.
Okay, go ahead.
That all the cameras at Resorts World, Tacos El Carbone location, are connected to, and then that is fed to the casino surveillance department inside of Resorts World. And being that I
whoa, hold on a second. Whoa, you just said something that's very interesting to me because I talked about this in the last two podcasts I did on this when JP, you said in your deposition, was frantic that he needed to change the password, and the court the stenographer said it was a reporter, and I finally figured it was the recorder. So now this is very interesting because usually, well, I can tell you what it was with the Riviera. Vendors had their own installed video cameras into the digital video recorders in their separate property we didn't have access to. But you're telling me that the cameras inside Tacos El Cabron in Resorts World are fed to the Resorts World surveillance / security camera system?
That's my belief, is that they have remote access to it. And I don't know the exact details, but the registers and POS system that are in Tacos El Carbone are provided by Resorts World as part of their 50% ownership stake or agreement. And all the payments and everything I don't know whose bank account they go to or where they go, but what I can tell you this is I oversaw the installation of the telecommunication lines, the Cat 6 wiring that was brought underground from Resorts World to Tacos El Carbone and then hooked up and fed to the POS register systems. And they specifically needed cameras above the registers and other areas for the registers per whatever laws or codes or gaming. I'm not sure what it is, but even though there's no gaming at Tacos El Carbone, since the registers are owned by Resorts World and the information on the registers like clocking in, clocking out, all of that stuff goes through Resorts World, there's cameras there. Inside of Tacos El Carbone, there's a 16-channel NVR network video recorder with high-definition 4K cameras, and they're all plugged in there locally. And then there's internet access remotely on that system through the internet, which is provided by lv.net, the internet supplier for Tacos El Carbone, so that the owners or management of Tacos El Carbone can review or see the cameras. And I was told at one point that Resorts World either had access to that system or needed access or might need access. I'm not sure exactly, but it was brought up in a couple different on-site meetings that involved me and JP, not Jaime, not David. David was never there. He was only there once or twice when they were building it and right after they opened. I didn't really interact with him or Jaime. I always interacted with JP. He was the point man, the go-to guy. But I had access to that camera system until they changed the password. And they didn't tell me the reason why they were changing the password is because RJ Cipriani sent an email to the Gaming Control Board letting them know that I had access to those cameras and that the password should be changed. He emailed the Gaming Control Board. I've obtained a copy of that email that shows that he told them this. So the Gaming Control Board contacted Resorts World Surveillance and instructed Tacos El Carbone, namely JP, John Paul, to change the password. John Paul contacted me, this is a few months ago, and asked me how to do it and just told me that they just needed to do it. And that was it.
Okay, let me get back to something.
It got changed.
Let me get back to something because this is, to me, this is important. Did I understand you correctly? You're telling me that the cash registers, the registers inside Tacos El Carbone are owned by Resorts World?
Yes, they're owned by Resorts World. They're provided by Resorts World. The people from the IT department and also from whoever manages that part of it with the registers and communications and whatever else, they came and met with me on 2 different occasions. I can't remember. It's a woman and a guy. I can't remember their names, but they came and met with me, told me where they wanted the registers to go, what type of wiring they wanted there, how they wanted it hooked up, and that they were providing the registers. And they led me to believe that they had a lot of power, authority, and input on a lot of different things that were going on there because of their ownership stake. Now, those employees never told me anything about their ownership stake. Only David did. I don't think Jaime ever even mentioned it, but David did for sure because he just mentioned it a few months ago to me. And JP mentioned it several times. And then I was there when those people talked about, their business lease or whatever. But Scott Sibella, clear as day, the night that he was drinking at that bar upstairs in that lounge where the tournament was, very much so talked about Resorts World owning half of Tacos El Carbone and that it's being ran and built by idiots and things like that. Like, he was very irate and upset. So I can confirm with 100% certainty that based on several conversations and meetings with Resorts World executives and with Scott Sibella on 2 different occasions and JP and David and conversations, yes, as far as I understand, as far as I've led to believe, as far as I've witnessed with my own eyes, Resorts World is a 50% owner of Tacos El Carbone. which, according to media reports, they've denied, but I know, have seen, and heard otherwise.
Okay. That's very interesting because I said I've been out of the business for 10 years. When I was Director of Security and Surveillance at the Riviera, just as an example, so this is for people listening, my listeners, is that we had multiple vendors inside the Riviera, but their camera system and their point-of-sale registers were totally independent from our surveillance or security systems, separate from the hotel, the Riviera, because they were private vendors. This is very interesting that you believe the cash registers and the point-of-sale database, the wiring from the registers, is going to Resorts World into their system. That is very interesting because that's something.
Doug, let me pause you for something, Doug. I don't want your listeners to be confused. You just made a statement that you said that I believe. There is no believing. This is a truth. This is a fact. 1,000,000% fact. I bet my life on it. It's no question about it. I witnessed the Resorts World IT staff bringing the registers over. I witnessed them plugging them in, programming them. I witnessed the conversations I was previewed and partied to. I was involved in. It's not about what I believe or I think. I want to make sure that you understand this. This is a fact. Resorts World owns those registers. There's little serial numbers with stickers on them that say they're owned by Resorts World. Resorts World manages those registers. All the sales and everything that go through there, Resorts World gets the reports on those. They are 50% owner. And based on my interactions with the executive team, based on my interactions with the electricians that worked with me hand in hand, day after day, to fix the problems of getting the wiring from the IT room underneath the hotel casino through conduits that were brought in and put into the concrete before the concrete was poured. There was many problems to get this thing to work in the network, and I was involved in all of it, in solving the problems and providing solutions, working with the electrical contractors that were subcontracted out by Resorts World to bring the wires from Resorts World and have them terminated at the containers. And then I was responsible, my team and I, to take those wires and put them on a what's called a data switch or a T1 switch, and then run wires from those to the actual locations where the registers were going to go, plug them in, and then Resorts World would come back and they would program them and operate them and make sure they work.
Wow.
So there is no guessing. There is no anything. It's a very strange situation because normally with casinos, it's different. But because there's no outside gaming, I guess this was allowed.
Wow. Well, it is strange. At least
I know it's hard to believe with your experience at the Riviera that this kind of stuff happens.
Well, it's strange. It's strange because, and I don't want to get this out to the people. Like I said, I've been out of the business for 10 years. Is when I was in the business, MGM, Silverton, Riviera, those places, the vendors are totally independent. They're self-proprietary, for lack of better words. Their point-of-sale systems and their camera systems that, at least when I was in the business, were never interfaced with the point-of-sale system, the sales system with the casinos, or the cameras with the hotel. It was separate and independent. So this is very interesting because my question is why was Resorts World putting registers inside that register sales inside of Tacos El Carbone if they had no interest? Let me ask you a question because we're going to an hour and 20 minutes. We can do another podcast. So I want to ask you this. 2 questions. Were you, as of this date, were you ever interviewed in a formal interview with any agent from the Nevada Gaming Control Board?
I was interviewed not for this. I reached out to Nathan Allen, who is the deputy chief of the Gaming Control Board. I'm not sure if he's what division. He identified himself as the deputy chief. I called him a couple weeks ago. I identified myself and I said, I'm just giving you a heads up that my deposition was released and there's contradicting information from what Scott Sibella told you during his hearing and things like that. And I want you guys to get out in front of it. I'm just being, a person that's giving you this information. because Scott Sibella lied to the Gaming Control Board, and I can not only prove it, but he lied, and I'm a witness to his lies, and it's going to look bad for you all.
That was just a general conversation. What I'm asking you, did any agent, compliance agent, or enforcement agent from the Nevada Gaming Control Board ever come out to your home or ever ask you to go down to their headquarters since this all broke and say, we want to do a sit-down interview with you, and you would tell them exactly what you told me? Did that happen thus far?
No.
Okay, let me ask you
no.
another. Okay, that's good enough for me right now. Let me ask you another question. You said that Scott knew JP from San Diego, and that's how Tacos El Cabron end up going into Resorts World. So you know,
yes, that's what JP told me.
Okay, and let me ask you another question. Since all this stuff came out, my podcast, the articles that have come out in the past week or so, did you have any communication with either Jaime, David Stroge, or JP about any of this, or did they make contact with you and have any conversation with you about all this blowing up in the newspapers?
No, nothing was discussed with JP other than JP said that once this blows over, he'll talk to Scott and try to get me so I'm allowed back in the Resorts World. And David said the same thing, that JP is really good friends with Scott, and he's going to talk to him once this blows over to try to get me and David both to be allowed back in. But as far as extended conversations, 0 with Jaime, 1 or 2 with JP, very brief. But the extent of the conversations have mainly been with David. I've had maybe 10 conversations with David in the last couple months about all of this and about journalists, because David said that I said things that I didn't, and just back and forth. And I was supposed to be meeting with David in person in San Diego a few weeks ago because I was dropping off CMOS from my fiance's company. She owns a CMOS company called CMOS Cartel and Company here in Las Vegas. And David regularly buys CMOS from her, 5 to 10 jars at a time. We either ship him the jars, or one of his employees, JP or Jesse, drive it down to him, or I deliver it. So I went down to San Diego 3 weeks ago, going into the second week of April, and I went down there to meet with David, but he had to leave town for Passover to his family's house, and he stood me up for 2 days, and then he had his new, what he referred to as girlfriend, meet me at Tacos El Cabron and give me the money for the CMOS that I dropped off a few days earlier. And David and I had spoken about the news articles and my deposition several times over the last couple of months.
Did he or anybody else tell you to keep quiet until this blows over, anything like that? Did anybody make any statements like that to you?
David just said I shouldn't talk to the press. I shouldn't talk to anyone. That's about it. He didn't say anything else as far as, don't say anything or keep quiet. When I brought up the fact that I did not know his father owned it, I didn't know whatever, he basically told me that his father owns it and manages it. And then I said, well, wait a minute, David, you told me before that you own it with Jaime and JP, and now you're changing your story. Your story was different than what you have now. And he just changed the subject. He says, nope, my father owns it.
And when did this conversation take place, the one you just described?
About 5 or 6 weeks ago.
Okay. Let me ask you a question. Who is Jesse? You keep talking about Jesse at Tacos. Who is that?
Jesse is the general manager of the Tacos El Cabron at Resorts World.
Is that a male or female?
Yeah, he's a male.
Do you know?
He's also, I think, the general manager of the one on Maryland too. I think he runs both
Do
stores.
you know his last name?
I do not.
Okay. Listen, Brandon, I appreciate it. We're going to cut this off. We're an hour and a half. We're going to do another podcast. I'll give you the closing. Anything you want to say to the?
I would like to add a couple things. Number one, I never intentionally meant to hurt Scott by giving my deposition, but I'm asked questions under oath, and I don't get a preview of what those questions are before I'm asked, and I have to tell the truth and nothing but the truth. Otherwise, I commit perjury, and I could be arrested and go to jail, charged with a crime. So I didn't bring this on to myself. The same thing with Tacos El Cabron and David and Jaime and JP and these guys. I'm asked questions under oath that I didn't know were going to be asked of me, so I answered them truthfully. I didn't know that David's father was the alleged owner. I had no idea. Nothing like that was ever mentioned to me. I was always led to believe with direct statements that David, Jaime, and JP and some private investors were the partners. Had I been told the truth from the get-go, maybe I would have kept my mouth shut. I wouldn't have lied. I don't know, but I didn't volunteer anything on purpose. And all these guys are mad at me because of the truth coming out. Well, when you're deposed, you have to tell the truth. And lastly, I do believe the Gaming Control Board swept it under the carpet because it's been 2 weeks since I made the call to Nathan Allen, and no one's called me. He said he was going to assign an investigator to this in the enforcement division or something like that to investigate it. No one's called me. And many years ago, there was a very similar incident with Jody Lake, the COO or CEO of Hard Rock Hotel, who also is the CEO or COO of Warner Gaming with Bill Warner. And Jody Lake was going before a key license holder, and he had to tell the Gaming Control Board that he didn't know me because I'm an ex-felon from 23 years ago and that I was just a contractor, when in fact, I am much more than a contractor to Jody Lake. For many years, we were very, very good friends. Once I went to his house, I did all kinds of things, and I knew him and hung out with him. No girls, no drugs, just family things and sporting games and things many, many, many times, well more than Scott. And when Jody did something really, really bad, which I have videos of with pertaining to Hard Rock, and he was turned in for what he did, the Gaming Control investigator contacted me. I gave my story. I said I had the videos. They obtained the videos, I believe, from the surveillance department at Hard Rock. And Jody laughed about it weeks later because he said that they brushed it under the carpet. They didn't even care. So it's my opinion and belief that the Gaming Control Board doesn't want negative publicity. Once they approve somebody for a key license, they don't want to look bad that they didn't do their proper due diligence or find out everything. So here you have a situation with Scott Sibella, which is pretty minor compared to what happened with Jody Lake and my friendship with him and the lies that he told the Gaming Control Board. So for whatever the reason is, it just seems to me that the Gaming Control Board wants to be left alone. And if it wasn't for the media and the press hounding them, this would be brushed under the carpet. Everyone would go on with their lives. Frankly, I don't give a shit what happens with Scott or if something happens in the future with anybody else. It's none of my business. I'm just telling the truth for questions I'm asked under oath and trying to set the record straight that I'm not a liar. I didn't lie. I told the truth, nothing but the truth. And there's plenty of evidence to corroborate my stories of the truth and that Scott lied and is a liar. Hence, he said, Brandon Sattler or whatever, he doesn't know me from Adam, and I was never a vendor at Resorts World. Well, 3 different instances with him in person talking about Tacos El Cabron debunked that lie. And when he says he doesn't know me from Adam, so he doesn't remember our interactions at the Downtown Grand, at the Palms, at the parties, maybe he did so much blow that night or those nights, which I didn't see, but I was led to believe that he did it. And based on seeing him after he would disappear with a girl or be drinking, he looks pretty fucked up and he was annihilated. It's no secret. Everybody in MGM Grand knew. There was even a floor supervisor that worked at Tropicana where he would go in at the Tropicana many years ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, and he would harass this girl, try to take her out. Come on, let me take you out. He would get drunk and make sexual advances to her, made her feel uncomfortable. This woman works at Resorts World now, and she told me all of this. And it's just like, you know, maybe the past is finally catching up with him. It catches up to all of us. That's all I can say.
Okay, we're going to go in and end this podcast, this episode from now. Ladies and gentlemen, it's May 4th, 2022. It's Wednesday morning, 0 dark 47 hours. out here, Pacific time, 0047, 48 minutes after midnight. You've been listening to the Truth and Consequences podcast with Doug Poppa. Our guest tonight was Brandon Sattler. Everybody listening to the past podcast is familiar. If you're not, go back and look at it so you won't have to go through the whole history. Brandon, I appreciate it. We'll do this again if you have any questions. Anything turns up that you want to talk about, we'll do another podcast. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely. I'm here, and I would love to be able to provide the truth and nothing but the truth for these things. And, you know, it's not about exposing anyone. It's not about defaming anyone or slandering them. It's just about providing the truth. And when somebody lies on the record, under oath, in front of an audience that's televised and broadcast, and they say statements that are not true, and those statements later come back to prove that they are true, you know, it's just something that each person has to deal with when they make those statements. And Scott should have just told the truth from the beginning, just as the truth is, you know, what it is. It probably would have been a lot better for him.
Okay, Brandon. Listen, you have a good night, and we'll talk again.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you heard what he had to say. It's 05:15 in the morning. It's Wednesday morning. So I'm going to shut this down a couple of minutes. There's some inconsistencies in what Mr. Sattler said, but as a whole, there's some real serious problems here. And I'm going to have to talk about it on another podcast, because it's already 1 hour and 31 minutes here. But I've been in the casino business. I've been an investigator. There's something seriously wrong here. More and more, it's looking like, to me, in my opinion, that Scott Sibella lied to the Gaming Control Board. And the other day, I read an article, or last week, where Resorts World spokesperson put something out saying that they did compliance and everything was okay, and they're not owners in Tacos El Cabron in any way. I believe I read that in somebody's article. But if Brandon Sattler's making all this up, he would be the world's greatest liar, because a lot of the stuff that he said can be confirmed, corroborated, from an investigative standpoint. People who seen him at Resorts World with Scott Sibella, people who were there when he was doing work at Tacos El Cabron, because Scott Sibella told the Gaming Control Board on March 2nd he did no work at Resorts World. And like I said, I saw some documents that lead me to believe, no doubt on what I saw, that he did do work for Resorts World, just like he said, this telecommunications and stuff. And the other problem I got with this that's real serious, ladies and gentlemen, unless things change, for the life of me, I can't understand why, if Tacos El Cabron is not connected with Resorts World, and Resorts World is not 50-50 owners like Mr. Sattler said he believes they are, why are there registers, Resorts World registers, point-of-sale registers, inside Tacos El Cabron, and why are those feeds for the point-of-sale system that goes to the computer system tied in with Resorts World, and so maybe are the surveillance cameras over the registers? It's very strange. It sounds like they do have some type of ownership, and it's going through their system, but I don't know. That's my opinion. I can say this: something's not right with this whole thing, and it's appearing more and more that Mr. Sibella and other people at Resorts World may not be telling the truth. That's my opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 05:18 hours. Remember, hit the red subscribe button on my YouTube channel, audio podcast, the big ones on iHeartRadio and Spotify. This thing will be published here before I go to sleep. Well, it's going to take a couple hours to upload, so I may take a nap and then it'll be out tomorrow morning. Very disturbing, some of the stuff I just heard, because there's a lot of contradictions to what Mr. Sibella said to the Gaming Control Board and statements put out by Resorts World Las Vegas. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, And you all have a good morning. And next episode, we'll be talking about the Las Vegas Metro Police. I got some information the other day I got to get out. So appreciate it. Thanks for listening.